September 1970, Jordan erupts, not in war against its neighbor Israel, but against itself. This was Black September, a brutal civil war pitting the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, led by King Hussein, against the Palestine Liberation Organization, the PLO, led by Yasser Arafat. It was a pivotal, bloody clash that would dramatically reshape the Middle East. The seeds of this conflict were sown 3 years earlier, in the aftermath of the devastating 1967 Six-Day War. Israel's swift victory saw it capture the West Bank from Jordan, displacing hundreds of thousands of Palestinians into the East Bank. This influx swelled Jordan's refugee population and empowered the PLO, which began operating as a quasi-state within Jordan's borders. By 1970, armed Palestinian militias, the Fedayeen, challenged the king's authority, launched attacks on Israel from Jordanian soil, inviting reprisals, and brought the nation to the brink. Hussein faced a choice: assert control or lose his kingdom. His decision led to a dramatic showdown, a Hashemite triumph that expelled the PLO but also exported chaos, fundamentally recalibrating the region's fragile balance of power. The Six-Day War in June 1967 was a watershed moment. Faced with escalating rhetoric from Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser and troop buildups, Israel launched a preemptive strike. Despite urgent warnings from Israeli Prime Minister Levi Eshkol, "Should Jordan open hostilities, we shall react with our might." King Hussein, caught between Arab pressure and strategic reality, fatefully chose to join the fray. The result was catastrophic for the Arab coalition, and particularly devastating for Jordan. Hussein ordered shelling of Israeli positions. Israel responded with overwhelming force. In 6 days, the respected Jordanian Arab Legion was defeated. Israel captured the entire West Bank, territory Jordan had held since 1948. Most symbolically, Israeli forces took the old city of Jerusalem. Colonel Matagur's famous words, "The Temple Mount is in our hands," echoed a profound national victory for Israel, but dealt a severe blow to Hussein's prestige, whose dynasty derived legitimacy from protecting Jerusalem's Islamic holy sites. Beyond the loss of land and prestige, Jordan faced a massive humanitarian and economic crisis. At least 300,000 new refugees flooded across the Jordan River, altering the kingdom's demographics and straining resources. The loss of the West Bank was economically crippling. It contained 70% of Jordan's agricultural land, half its industry, and the vital tourism revenue from Jerusalem. Overall, the occupied areas represented nearly 40% of Jordan's GNP. King Hussein's standing was significantly weakened, leaving his regime vulnerable. Humiliation and displacement fueled Palestinian nationalism. Fedayeen organizations with the PLO at the forefront rapidly gained influence within Jordan. They established armed strongholds, particularly in refugee camps like Wahdat and Jabal Hussein near Amman, which became virtual no-go areas for Jordanian police. These groups operated with increasing autonomy, establishing their own welfare and education systems, directly challenging King Hussein's sovereignty, a state within a state. This rise was fueled by a sense that Arab states had failed, and Palestinians needed to take matters into their own hands. Their confidence was boosted by the Battle of Karameh in March 1968. Though costly, PLO fighters alongside the Jordanian army stood their ground against an Israeli raid. The PLO skillfully spun this into a heroic victory, restoring a measure of Arab pride and attracting more recruits. Hussein was trapped. Confronting the PLO risked alienating his large Palestinian population and powerful Arab neighbors like Egypt and Syria, who championed the Palestinian cause. This paralysis allowed Yasser Arafat and the PLO to further entrench their power. King Hussein desperately sought a diplomatic solution. He appealed to the US and the UN, hoping enforcement of Security Council Resolution 242 calling for Israeli withdrawal from occupied territories in exchange for peace and secure borders, would return the West Bank and undercut the PLO's influence. As historian Avi Shleim notes, it was a package deal, land for peace. But Israel, lacking trust and demanding direct negotiations and recognition before withdrawal from what it saw as indefensible lines, rejected unilateral withdrawal. The international community couldn't enforce the resolution. Diplomatic avenues closed. As Hussein's efforts faltered, Palestinian frustration grew. Radical Marxist factions like George Habash's Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, PFLP, and Nayef Hawatmeh's Democratic Front, DFLP, gained prominence. Unlike Arafat's Fatah, initially reluctant to directly oppose Arab regimes, these groups saw Hussein as a reactionary, a puppet of Western imperialism, and an obstacle to a wider Arab revolution against Israel. Calls for the overthrow of the Hashemite monarchy grew louder. By 1970, the situation was untenable. Armed PLO militias operated with impunity, especially in the capital, Amman. One observer described them acting like an army of occupation, extorting money, ignoring laws, and boasting of their destiny while belittling the Jordanian army. Arafat, seemingly unable or unwilling to control his forces, behaved like a feudal warlord. Hussein attempted to restore order with a 10-point edict regulating weapons and movement, but the Fedayeen reacted violently, forcing him to back down. Rumors of his abdication swirled, but Hussein was buying time. In February 1970, a secret, unprecedented communication took place. Through U.S. channels, Hussein asked Israel three crucial questions. Would Israel exploit Jordan-thinning border forces to deal with internal threats? Would Israel avoid retaliation for PLO provocations during this time? Would Israel assist Jordan if neighboring countries intervened to help the PLO? Israel's response, conveyed back through the U.S., was pragmatic. 1. No, Israel wouldn't attack Jordan. 2. Israel would respond vigorously to terrorist provocations. 3. Israel was willing to discuss assisting Jordan if needed. This secret understanding was critical. It reduced the risk of Israeli interference and offered a potential backstop against Syrian or Iraqi intervention, emboldening Hussein for the inevitable confrontation. Tensions escalated dramatically. Clashes erupted in Zarqa in June. Hussein survived an assassination attempt on June 9th, leading to heavy fighting. A fragile ceasefire signed by Hussein and Arafat on July 10th was immediately undermined by radical factions like the PFLP. Acceptance of the US-backed Rogers Plan peace initiative by Hussein and Egypt further enraged the PLO, who saw it as a sellout. On September 1st, another attempt on Hussein's life. Then, on September 6th, the PFLP executed a stunning series of hijackings. Multiple international jets were commandeered and forced to land at a remote desert airstrip near Zarqa, dramatically renamed Revolution Airport. One attempt on an El Al flight was foiled. Another plane was flown to Cairo and destroyed. On September 9th, a British airliner joined the others at Dawson's Field. With hundreds of hostages and the world watching, the PFLP demanded the release of Palestinian prisoners. After tense days, the remaining hostages were removed, and on September 12th, the PFLP blew up the 3 empty jets in a spectacular act of defiance on Jordanian soil. This, as one observer noted, showed that the Jordanian army was vulnerable. It was the absolute breaking point. Coexistence was impossible. On September 16, 1970, King Hussein declared martial law, dismissed the civilian government, and ordered the military to crush the rebellion. The next day, the Jordanian army moved into Amman and besieged PLO strongholds in refugee camps and other cities like Irbid and Zarqa. Intense, bloody fighting erupted. Jordanian tanks and artillery pounded Fedayeen positions in densely populated areas. The PLO resisted fiercely but were outgunned. Casualty estimates vary wildly, from 2,000 up to Arafat's claim of 25,000 killed in the first 10 days. Facing annihilation, Arafat pleaded for help from Arab allies. Syria's Hafez al-Assad responded, sending armored divisions across the border towards Irbid. But the intervention quickly failed. Jordanian Hawker Hunter jets, controlling the skies, inflicted heavy losses on the Syrian columns which lacked their own air cover. Simultaneously, the US put its fleet on alert, and Israel, honoring its secret understanding, mobilized forces on the Golan Heights and flew menacing reconnaissance flights. Deterred by Jordan's resistance and the credible threat of US and Israeli action, Assad ordered a humiliating withdrawal by September 22nd. The failed Syrian intervention sealed the PLO's fate in Jordan. The Jordanian army pressed its advantage, driving the Fedayeen out. By 1971, the PLO leadership and fighters were completely expelled, forced into exile, primarily in Lebanon. Black September ended with a decisive victory for King Hussein. His authority was consolidated, the Hashemite monarchy strengthened, and his image cemented as a resilient leader who had defended his kingdom from internal rebellion and external invasion. But victory had consequences. Palestinians remaining in Jordan saw their rights curtailed and influence diminished, and the expulsion simply exported the problem. The PLO regrouped in Lebanon, establishing new bases and infrastructure, tragically destabilizing that nation. Regionally, Black September triggered a major realignment. Jordan distanced itself from radical Arab nationalism, moving closer to the West, particularly the US. The PLO, now based in Lebanon, shifted strategy, intensifying guerrilla attacks on Israel and embracing high-profile international terrorism, like the horrific 1972 Munich Olympics massacre. Lebanon, once the Paris of the Middle East, descended into civil war, fueled partly by the PLO presence. Israel's strategic focus shifted north, countering the PLO in Lebanon. This gradually eased tensions on the Jordanian border, paving the way decades later for the historic 1994 peace treaty between Jordan and Israel. Black September was more than just a Jordanian civil war. It was a brutal, defining conflict that confirmed the Hashemite monarchy's grip on power, but came at a great human cost. It marked the expulsion of the PLO from Jordan, forcing a strategic shift that would have devastating consequences for Lebanon. It realigned regional powers, altered the course of the Arab-Israeli conflict, and sent ripples across the Middle East that are still felt today. A Hashemite triumph, achieved amid a fundamental and often tragic regional recalibration